I always thought I knew my neighborhood. The streets were familiar, the faces even more so. I could walk to the corner store with my eyes closed, wave to Mrs. Patel watering her roses, and hear the distant laughter of kids playing tag in the park. It was the kind of place where you felt safe leaving your front door unlocked, where the biggest worry was whether the mailman would accidentally deliver your package to the house across the street. But sometimes the places we trust the most are the ones that hide the darkest secrets. Sometimes the monsters don't come from far away. They're already here, just waiting for the right moment to show themselves. I never used to believe in that. I thought the world was divided into safe places and dangerous ones, and I was lucky enough to live in the first category. But all it took was 3 nights, 3 encounters to shatter that illusion forever. I'm not the same person I was before. I don't look at my neighborhood the same way. And after you hear what happened, maybe you won't either. The first story happened in the heart of summer, when the days stretched long and the nights felt endless. I was 16, old enough to crave independence, but still young enough to feel invincible. My parents trusted me to walk the dog after dinner, and I loved those quiet, dusky strolls. The air would be thick with the scent of cut grass and barbecue smoke, and the sky would glow with the last traces of sunlight. It was my time to unwind, to let my mind wander as my dog, Max, sniffed every tree and mailbox along the way. That night started like any other. I clipped Max's leash, grabbed my headphones, and set out down Maple Avenue. The houses were lit up, windows glowing with the soft blue of TV screens. I passed the old Miller house, the one with the peeling paint and the overgrown yard, and nodded to Mr. Miller, who was sitting on his porch with a beer in hand. He raised his bottle in greeting, and I smiled back. Everything felt normal, safe, routine. I took the long route, looping around the park before heading back toward my street. The park was empty except for a couple of teenagers skateboarding near the basketball court. I barely noticed them as I walked by, lost in my music and the rhythm of Max's paws on the pavement. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. As I turned onto Oak Lane, I noticed something strange. There was a car parked at the curb, engine running, headlights off. It wasn't unusual to see cars parked on the street, but this one was different. It was an old, beat-up sedan, the kind you'd expect to see abandoned in a junkyard, not idling in a quiet neighborhood. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside, and there was a faint, pulsing glow from the dashboard. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was probably just someone waiting for a friend or checking directions. But as I got closer, Max started to pull at the leash, his ears flat and his tail tucked. He never acted like that, not even around the neighborhood's loudest dogs. I slowed down, my heart thumping a little faster, and glanced at the car as I passed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's window rolled down just a crack, and I saw a pair of eyes watching me, cold, unblinking, and far too interested. I kept walking, trying to act casual, but every instinct screamed at me to run. The car didn't move, but I could feel those eyes following me, burning into my back. I turned the corner onto my street, and only then did I risk a glance over my shoulder. The car was still there, engine humming, exhaust curling into the night air. I hurried home, locking the door behind me and peeking through the blinds. The car didn't follow, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been marked somehow, that I'd stumbled into someone's crosshairs without even realizing it. Told my parents about the car, but they brushed it off. Probably just someone lost, they said, or a neighbor's friend waiting to be picked up. I wanted to believe them. I really did, but the next night the car was back. Same spot, same silent engine, same invisible driver. This time I didn't walk Max past it. I turned around and took the long way home, my skin prickling with every step. When I got home, I watched from my bedroom window as the car finally pulled away, disappearing into the darkness. The third night, I didn't walk Max at all. I made up an excuse about homework and stayed inside, but I couldn't relax. Every time a car drove by, I tensed up, waiting for the sound of that engine idling outside. Around midnight, I heard something, a soft tapping at the front door. Max started barking, low and furious, the way he did when someone he didn't know came too close. My parents were already asleep, so I crept downstairs, heart pounding, and peeked through the peephole. There was no one there. Just the empty porch, bathed in the yellow glow of the porch light. I waited, barely breathing, until Max finally calmed down. I never saw the car again after that, but I never felt safe on those walks again either. The neighborhood hadn't changed, but I had. I started to notice things I'd ignored before, the way the shadows seemed to stretch a little longer, the way strangers' faces lingered just a second too long. I realized that safety is just an illusion, and sometimes the scariest things are the ones that hide in plain sight. The second encounter happened almost a year later, but the memory of that car still lingered in the back of my mind. I'd grown more cautious, more aware of my surroundings, but I never expected that the next time fear would find me, it would be inside my own home. It was late autumn, the kind of night when the wind rattles the windows and the trees outside look like twisted shadows against the sky. My parents had gone out to dinner for their anniversary, leaving me alone with Max and a promise to bring back dessert. I was 17 by then, old enough to be trusted alone, but not old enough to shake the feeling that something could go wrong at any moment. I spent the evening curled up on the couch, watching old horror movies and pretending I wasn't jumping at every creak and groan the house made. Max lay at my feet, snoring softly, his presence a small comfort in the empty house. The wind howled outside, and every so often a branch would scrape against the siding, making me flinch. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was being ridiculous, but the unease wouldn't go away. Around 10 o'clock, I heard a noise that didn't fit the usual pattern. A soft, deliberate knock at the back door. Not the front, where visitors usually came, but the back, which opened onto the dark, fenced-in yard. I muted the TV and listened, my heart thudding in my chest. The knock came again, a little louder this time, followed by a low, muffled voice I couldn't quite make out. I crept to the kitchen, Max at my heels, and peered through the window above the sink. At first I saw nothing but darkness. Then as my eyes adjusted, I made out a figure standing just outside the door. He was tall, wearing a hooded jacket, his face hidden in shadow. He stood perfectly still as if he knew I was watching. I froze, unsure what to do. My phone was in the living room, just a few steps away, but it felt like miles. I backed away from the window, trying to keep quiet, but Max started to growl, low and menacing. The man at the door must have heard, because he knocked again, harder this time. I could hear him speaking now, his voice rough and insistent. "Hey, can you help me? My car broke down. I just need to use your phone." Every instinct screamed at me not to open the door. I remembered all the warnings my parents had given me about strangers, about never letting anyone in when I was home alone. I grabbed my phone and dialed my dad's number with shaking hands. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and oblivious to the fear in mine. "Dad, there's someone at the back door. He says he needs help, but I don't know him. What should I do?" My dad's tone changed instantly, all warmth gone. "Don't open the door. Stay inside, keep the doors locked, and call the police if he doesn't leave." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me, and crept back to the kitchen. The man was still there, now pacing back and forth on the patio, glancing up at the windows as if trying to see inside. I ducked out of sight, my heart racing. Max barked loud and sharp, and the man stopped, staring at the door. I called the police, my voice barely steady as I explained the situation. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, to keep the doors locked and wait for officers to arrive. I could hear the man outside still muttering to himself, still knocking every few minutes. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an hour. Finally, I heard the distant wail of sirens. The man must have heard them too, because he bolted, disappearing into the darkness of the yard. I watched from the window as 2 police cars pulled up, their lights flashing red and blue against the night. The officers searched the yard, but the man was gone, vanished as quickly as he'd appeared. They took my statement, asked if I'd seen him before, if anything like this had ever happened. I shook my head, still trembling, and they promised to patrol the neighborhood more often. My parents came home soon after, their faces pale with worry. They hugged me tight, apologizing for leaving me alone. But I knew it wasn't their fault. The world had changed, or maybe I had. The house that had always felt like a fortress now seemed fragile, its walls thin and its locks easily broken. For weeks after, I jumped at every sound, every shadow. I double-checked the doors and windows before bed, kept my phone within arm's reach at all times. I started to notice things I'd never paid attention to before. The way the streetlights flickered, the way footsteps echoed on the sidewalk outside. I realized that fear doesn't always come from the unknown. Sometimes it comes from the places you thought you knew best. The third encounter happened just a few months ago, and it's the one that still keeps me up at night. By then I was 18, about to leave for college, and I thought I'd finally outgrown the paranoia that had crept into my life. I'd convinced myself that the earlier incidents were just bad luck, that lightning couldn't possibly strike 3 times in the same place. I was wrong. It was early spring, the kind of night when the air is cool but not cold, and the scent of blooming flowers drifts through open windows. I'd been out late with friends, celebrating the end of our last high school exams. We'd laughed, shared stories, and promised to stay in touch no matter where life took us. By the time I got home, it was nearly midnight. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. I parked my car at the curb and walked up the driveway, my keys jingling in my pocket. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow over the front steps. I paused for a moment, taking in the familiar sight of my house, the place I'd grown up, the place I'd always felt safe. I had no idea that was about to change. As I reached the front door, I noticed something odd, a faint metallic clinking sound coming from the side of the house. At first I thought it was just the wind, maybe a loose gutter or a branch tapping against the siding. But as I listened, the sound grew louder, more deliberate. It was rhythmic, almost like someone was tapping a coin against the window. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob, and glanced toward the side yard. The motion sensor light hadn't turned on, which meant whatever was making the noise was staying just out of its range. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild after a long night. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, locking it behind me out of habit. The house was dark and quiet, my parents already asleep upstairs. I set my keys on the table and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest. That's when I heard it again, the metallic tapping, louder now, coming from the window above the sink. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I crept to the window and peered out, but all I could see was my own reflection in the glass, distorted by the darkness outside. Suddenly, a face appeared in the window, pressed up against the glass. It was a man, his features twisted into a grotesque grin, his eyes wide and unblinking. He was so close I could see the fog of his breath on the glass, the stubble on his chin, the wild look in his eyes. He raised his hand and tapped a coin against the window, slow and deliberate, never breaking eye contact. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my glass. My first instinct was to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. The operator answered, her voice calm and steady, but I could barely get the words out. "There's someone at my window. He's just standing there staring at me." She told me to stay on the line, to lock all the doors, and wait for the police. I did as she said, moving from room to room, checking every lock, every window. The man followed me, moving from window to window, always just out of reach, always watching. He never tried to break in, never said a word. He just watched, his grin growing wider with every passing minute. The police arrived within 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. By the time they got there, the man was gone, vanished into the night. They searched the yard, found footprints in the flower beds, but nothing else. No sign of forced entry, no clues as to who he was or what he wanted. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, that grin, those eyes. I started sleeping with the lights on, a baseball bat by my bed. My parents tried to reassure me, told me it was probably just a prank, some local kid trying to scare me, but I knew better. There was something about the way he watched me, the way he seemed to know exactly where I was at all times. It wasn't random, it was personal. I started noticing little things, scratches on the window frames, muddy footprints on the porch, the feeling of being watched whenever I left the house. I stopped going out at night, stopped walking Max alone. The neighborhood that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a trap, every shadow hiding a potential threat. I never saw the man again, but the fear never left. It lingered in the corners of my mind, a constant reminder that safety is never guaranteed. that danger can find you anywhere, even in the places you call home. I used to think my neighborhood was the safest place in the world. Now, I know better. After that third encounter, everything about my neighborhood felt different. The streets I'd once wandered without a second thought now seemed to close in around me, every familiar corner hiding a new threat. I started to notice things I'd never paid attention to before. The way the streetlights flickered and buzzed. The way the wind seemed to carry whispers late at night. The way people's faces changed when they thought no one was watching. I realized that fear doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how you see the world. I tried to talk to my friends about what had happened, hoping that sharing my story would make the fear feel less real. Some of them listened, their eyes wide with concern, but most just shrugged it off. "It's probably just some weirdo," they said. "Stuff like that happens everywhere." Maybe they were right, but that didn't make it any easier to sleep at night. I started to wonder if I was overreacting, if maybe I was letting my imagination get the best of me. But then I'd remember the look in that man's eyes, the way he seemed to see right through me, and I knew it wasn't just in my head. My parents tried to help in their own way. They installed new locks on all the doors and windows, put up motion sensor lights around the house, even bought a security camera for the front porch. For a while it helped. I'd watch the camera feed on my phone, checking every time I heard a noise outside. Most of the time it was nothing, just a stray cat or a gust of wind. But sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of something that made my blood run cold. A shadow moving just out of frame, a figure standing at the edge of the yard, watching. I started to keep a journal, writing down every strange thing that happened. Every time I felt that prickling sense of being watched, it was a way to make sense of the chaos, to convince myself that I wasn't losing my mind. The entries piled up quickly. Footsteps on the porch at midnight, a car idling at the end of the street, a stranger lingering too long at the corner store. Each incident seemed small on its own, easy to dismiss, but together they painted a picture I couldn't ignore. One night I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was a notification from the security camera app. Motion detected front porch. My heart pounded as I opened the feed, half expecting to see nothing at all. But there he was, the same man from the window, standing on the porch, his face hidden in the shadows. He didn't move, didn't try to get in. He just stood there staring at the camera, as if he knew I was watching. I called the police again, my voice shaking as I explained what was happening. They arrived within minutes, but by the time they got there, the man was gone. They searched the neighborhood but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of forced entry. Nothing to prove that he'd ever been there at all. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. After that, I started to wonder if I was the only one who'd seen him. I asked my neighbors if they'd noticed anything strange, but most just shook their heads. A few mentioned hearing noises at night or seeing unfamiliar cars parked on the street, but no one seemed as scared as I was. I felt isolated, trapped in my own fear, unable to convince anyone that something was really wrong. I started to dread the nights, counting down the hours until sunrise. I'd lie in bed, listening to every creak and groan of the house, every rustle of wind outside. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps on the porch, or the soft tap of fingers on the window, and I'd freeze, too scared to move. Other times I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing from nightmares I couldn't remember. The worst part was the uncertainty, the not knowing if or when he'd come back, or what he wanted. I tried to tell myself that it was over, that he'd moved on, but the fear never really went away. It became a part of me, a shadow that followed me everywhere I went. I started to think about leaving, about getting as far away from that neighborhood as possible. College was just a few months away, and the thought of starting over somewhere new was the only thing that kept me going. But even as I packed my bags and said goodbye to the house I'd grown up in, I knew that the fear would follow me. It wasn't just about the neighborhood anymore. It was about the realization that nowhere is truly safe, that danger can find you no matter where you go. I wish I could say that things got better after I left, that the nightmares stopped and the fear faded away. But the truth is, some scars never heal. I still jump at every unexpected noise, still check the locks before I go to bed, still glance over my shoulder when I walk alone at night. I've learned to live with the fear, to let it remind me to be careful, to trust my instincts. But I'll never forget those 3 encounters, or the way they changed me forever. I left for college that August, 1,000 miles away from the neighborhood that had shaped me, both for better and for worse. The campus was alive with energy, a constant hum of voices and laughter, and for a while I let myself believe that I could finally leave the fear behind. My new dorm room was small but bright, with a window that overlooked a busy courtyard instead of a dark, empty street. I made friends quickly, throwing myself into classes and late-night study sessions, trying to fill every hour so there was no room left for old memories to creep in. But fear, I learned, is a stubborn thing. It doesn't care about distance or new beginnings. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the spaces between laughter and conversation, in the silence that falls just before sleep. I'd find myself jolting awake at the sound of footsteps in the hallway, heart racing as I remembered the man at my window, the car idling in the dark, the stranger at the back door. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of my own reflection in the glass and flinch, half expecting to see someone else staring back at me. I tried to talk about it with my new friends, but it was hard to put into words. How do you explain the way fear can change the shape of your world? How it can turn the most ordinary places into something sinister? Most of them listened politely, offering reassurances and jokes, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. To them, it was just a story, something that happened to someone else somewhere far away. But to me, it was a shadow that followed me everywhere. One night, a few weeks into the semester, I was walking back to my dorm after a late study session at the library. The campus was quiet, the paths lit by pools of yellow light. I was almost at my building when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, measured, just a little too close. I glanced over my shoulder, my breath catching in my throat. It was just another student, head down, earbuds in, lost in his own world. But for a moment my mind flashed back to those nights at home, to the feeling of being watched, followed, hunted. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me, and sat on my bed until my heart stopped racing. That's the thing about fear. It teaches you to be careful, to pay attention, to trust your instincts even when everyone else tells you you're overreacting. It's a lesson I wish I'd never had to learn, but one I carry with me every day. I still walk with my keys between my fingers, still check the back seat before I get in my car, still keep my phone charged and within reach at all times. I know now that safety isn't something you can take for granted. It's something you have to fight for every single day. Sometimes, I wonder what happened to the man who watched me from the window, or the stranger who knocked at my door, or the driver of that silent, idling car. Did they move on to someone else's neighborhood, someone else's life? Or are they still out there, waiting for another chance to slip through the cracks? I'll probably never know. But I do know this: I'm not the same person I was before. I'm stronger, more aware, maybe a little more guarded. But I'm also determined not to let fear control me. If you're listening to this, maybe you've had your own close call, your own moment when the world suddenly felt a little less safe. Maybe you've brushed it off, told yourself it was nothing, just a trick of the light or a bad dream. Or maybe you felt that cold certainty, the knowledge that something was really wrong, even when no one else believed you. If so, I hope you'll trust yourself. I hope you'll listen to that voice in your head that tells you to lock the door, to cross the street, to call for help. Because sometimes that voice is the only thing standing between you and the darkness. I still visit my old neighborhood sometimes when I'm home for the holidays or a long weekend. Looks the same as it always did. Quiet streets, tidy lawns, neighbors waving from their porches. But I see it differently now. I see the places where the shadows gather, the corners where danger might be hiding. I see the faces of the people I thought I knew, and I wonder what secrets they're keeping. I know now that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor, a stranger, a face in the crowd. But I also see the good, the friends who checked in on me, the parents who did their best to keep me safe, the officers who came when I called. I see the strength it took to keep going, to face each new day even when I was afraid. And I know that in the end, fear didn't win. I did. So if you ever find yourself doubting your instincts or feeling like you're alone in your fear, remember this: you're not. We all have our own shadows, our own stories, our own battles to fight. But we also have the power to protect ourselves, to trust our gut, to keep moving forward even when the world feels dark and uncertain. And sometimes that's enough.